Hey guys, so in this video I'm going to be discussing one of the biggest topics in Black Desert, and that is the gear enhancement system, and more specifically, the gear disparity that exists between geared players, or soft cap and above, which is full Tett gear with tri-boss accessories, and lesser geared players, which are players below full Tett boss gear with tri-yellow accessories. So the first thing to note is Black Desert's gear system uses a combination of vertical and horizontal progression systems. So a vertical progression system is pretty much a gear treadmill. You're constantly going up, and increase in gear is an increase in stats. A horizontal progression system is where instead of going from gear set to gear set with higher stats, you go from gear set to gear set with the same number of stats, but different stat distributions. So in a vertical progression system, you'd go from 10 power to 15 power. But in horizontal, you go from 10 power to 10 power, but the power will be distributed differently. So instead of 5 crit, 3 damage, and 2 attack speed, you go to 4 crit, 3 damage, and 3 attack speed. So a horizontal progression system allows for greater customization of a character, whereas a vertical progression system allows for a greater power level in new content, because new content can be released alongside with a new set of gear designed to allow players to easily tackle that content once they've earned that gear set. Black Desert uses a combination of vertical and horizontal progression systems. You have the vertical progression system, which is enhancing gear from the base gear to plus 20, pen. There are 21 states, base, plus 1, plus 2, all the way up to Tett and pen, which are plus 19 and plus 20 respectively, as well as a horizontal progression system in that Pluribus is slowly introducing new sets of gear into the game, especially boss gear. But this boss gear is not stronger than previous boss gear, it simply offers different stats. For example, the brand new Offin Tett weapon offers more AP but less accuracy. So the problem is that one of the big draws of the game is the almost unlimited vertical progression and meaningful increases in power associated with each upgrade has created a sort of society where you want to keep upgrading your gear. You don't want to ever stop upgrading your gear. But there is no gear treadmill or point at which higher level players get stuck in progression, and lower levels can easily catch up, as there are in normal games that utilize vertical progression systems. Instead, new gear sets are all at the same power level as previous sets, but offer horizontal progression. And because Black Desert, the Pluribus developers, understood this, they made getting to plus 20 absolutely insanely difficult to get. For anyone that was around during the second year anniversary, you'll remember the infographic that was shared at the time showed that there were only just above 200 pen items across NA and EU in total. In the 2 years since the game has released, there's only about 200 across the two servers, which is pretty insane. So, because of how difficult it is to get these pen and even Tett items, Pluribus has clearly shown reluctance in nerfing the items or introducing new items or new power levels above the items, as they have done that once before. Originally, when the game released, the power level was only from the base item to plus 15. Pry through pen only came later. But because of how difficult it is to get pen compared to plus 15, Pluribus clearly doesn't want to increase the enhancement level any higher, say up to Deca, which would be plus 10, because it would probably drive away many of the whales and super hardcore players who have devoted huge amounts of time and effort in obtaining these pen items. But these pen items, as even the Tett items, have created a huge gear disparity and really power disparity between players that has only been exacerbated by things such as the new renown system and changes to base mechanics in the game. So I personally have 3 solutions. to this. Now, I'm not going to claim these solutions are perfect, but these are what I've come up with after talking with many different people on the subject and, thinking for quite a long time about it. So, the first solution is stat stick greens, which would have the high end being the exact same amount of stats as you have on boss gear. Now, what's important to note here is they would literally be stat stick greens. They would not have extra stats such as evasion or DR or accuracy on them. They would literally be giant stat sticks. So you would have the same amount of AP and DP as a similarly geared boss player if you were wearing this set of green armor. However, the real power of boss gear isn't necessarily in the additional AP and DP. It's in the huge amount of extra stats the boss gear have on them. The extra accuracy, the extra damage to humans or other species, or all species, I believe, in the case of Dandelion, and just the extra stuff it has in general. Uragon's is not so amazing and powerful because it's the brand new piece of boss gear. If that was the case, muskins would not be going up all the time. Like Tett muskins can sit on the marketplace for hours at a time right now. It's because Uragon's has a lot of extra DR on it compared to muskins, and DR is very powerful right now. And that is the big strength of horizontal progression. Horizontal progression allows for greater customization of your stats in specific directions. If you want to be a tank, you can look for as much DR as possible, grab extra evasion where you can, grab extra resistances and extra HP, and stack as much DP as possible. If you want to be full on damage, you can stack as much AP as possible, get extra damage against humans, get extra accuracy to hit through evasion builds, and that allows you to do more damage. And Black Desert doesn't really have that many substats. It's got a horizontal progression system, but the amount of substats it has is a little lacking, especially with the way that they've put attack speed, cast speed, and other stuff like that onto crystals. Although Zarka, for example, does offer attack speed or cast speed if that's what your class uses, and the new Offin Tett weapon offers crit. So these greens would not have access to these additional stats. They would literally be stat sticks, which would put you at a pretty big disadvantage compared to someone using boss gear, but you wouldn't get blown up by someone quite as easily as you do currently wearing duo or tri boss gear as you would in Tett or Pen of this new green gear. So that's the first solution. The second solution is my personal favorite, and that is stat dilution. So stat dilution is simply increasing the number of stats available on the piece of gear. No matter, there's a few different ways to do it. They can increase all the stats at every enhancement level, which has the effect of... So basically how stat dilution works, I guess I'll explain that quickly, is if you've got 100 AP and you go from Tri to Tett and gain 8 AP, you just gained 8% of your total AP in a single upgrade. If you have 1,000 AP and you go up by 8 AP, you gained 0.8% of your total AP in that upgrade, which is much less significant. And now obviously we don't need to dilute the stats that much, but we'd probably go from about 8 or 9% of an upgrade to 2 to 3% of an upgrade, which would be much more sustainable. It would still allow players to be powerful when upgrading their gear, but it would not have the level of going from full Tri to full Tett and absolutely dominating everyone below full Tett like there is currently. So stat dilution, there's a few ways to do it. There's, like I just said, you can blanket increase AP across the board. So multiply pretty much everything by 10 so that one piece of gear is upgrade. So if you just upgrade your weapon, all your accessories are giving you like 30, 40 AP each instead of 10 AP each now. So your weapon is much less impactful when upgrading from Tett to Pen or from Tri to Tett. Or you can increase the earlier levels of the weapon. So from +1 to +15, instead of going up by 3 to 4 AP, you could go up by 8 AP each time, or even higher, like 10 or 12 AP. And this can actually already be seen a little bit in-game. In Black Desert, if you go to Try, so upgrading from plus 15 to Pry, you get plus 8 AP for a weapon. Or we'll ignore armor for this. It's the same basic thing, but different numbers. So going from plus 15 to Pry, you get plus 8. From Pry to Duo, plus 8. From Try to Tett, plus 8. And from Tett to Pen, plus 8. So you'd figure with the pattern that exists, plus 8, x, plus 8, plus 8, that x would equal plus 8. But x does not equal plus 8, it equals plus 12. And if they applied this to all the lower sets, so if from plus 1 to plus 15 you gain plus 12 each time, and Pry and Duo you gain plus 12 each time, then it would be much more worthwhile not worthwhile, but basically lower upgrades would be worth more, and it would make higher level upgrades such as Tett and Pen worth less, which would dilute the stats. As I said, stat dilution. You could also go even further and have a bottom-heavy sort of stat distribution, which would be the first couple of enhancements would be worth more. So you'd start at like plus 20 for plus 1, and then by the time you get plus 15, you'd only be getting like plus 10 AP per upgrade, and then plus 8 AP for each upgrade past that, which is a bit more in diminishing returns, but same overall theory. You want to dilute the amount of stats available, or dilute the amount of AP you gain at the later upgrade levels with a higher number of stats. So stat dilution is my personal favorite because it doesn't really devalue anything that higher level players have already achieved. They've still got their pens. Their pens are still worth the same amount of money. They've still got the same additional amount of AP over the previous levels. The AP is just worth less relative to what it was worth before. It's not necessarily a nerf to pen, it's just a buff to previous levels. Now, talking about nerfs and buffs, the final solution, the third solution, is straight up nerfing and buffing numbers on the current enhancement system. This takes a bit from stat dilution. You can buff all the numbers of the earlier upgrades. For example, the reason plus 1 to plus 15 gives less AP than Pry through Pen could be argued that it's because of concentrated blackstones and the increased loss of max durability when you fail. But concentrated blackstones and the increased loss of max durability when you fail can also be seen as an additional currency and lever that Pearl Abyss can use to manage gear enhancement in the game. If they see that players are not enhancing fast enough, their gear isn't rising quickly enough to match new content they want to add, they can throw in an event, such as a Blackstone Gathering event, which increases the drop rates of sharps and hards and increases the number of concentrated Blackstones available in the game. If players are advancing too quickly for Pearl Abyss's liking, they can simply decrease the number of concentrated Blackstones flowing into the game and into the economy, and players will have a harder time enhancing. And it allows them to control for the power level past plus 15. But there's no reason that plus 1 through plus 15 should give less stats per upgrade than Pry through Pen. So they could easily just buff the amount of stats, same as option number 2, the second solution, and dilute the number of stats available by increasing the number of stats on a weapon prior to advancing to Pry through Pen. They could also simply nerf it and bring Pry through Pen in line with the upgrades for plus 1 through plus 15. But the problem with nerfing it is nerfing feels the worst for all players. It doesn't matter what stage of the game you're at, if one of your items gets nerfed, it feels bad. And especially if you've put as much time and effort into getting an item, such as a pen item, even if they nerf it but keep all the ratios intact, like if they nerfed everything in the game right now, and pen was still the exact same power level relative to before, a lot of players would still get angry and quit because they would feel that they'd been attacked and nerfed, and they would blame Pearl Abyss for this, even if all the numbers, statistically, if you had a 55% chance to win against lower geared players as a pen player before, and still 55% chance to win after, it would still feel terrible. And that's why nerfing, I'm really hesitant to say they should nerf it, because nerfing, it feels bad for all players, even players that aren't at Pen or Tett. It still feels terrible to get nerfed, and there's no real reason to nerf it. We don't have damage numbers in the game. Like, we can't see how much damage we're doing. We have to take someone else into arena and see how much damage, for example, a Spirit Legacy does at 200 AP versus 250, and there's a lot of hidden math in there, so it can be pretty difficult. So they could just buff all AP numbers by 10, so instead of capping at 200 AP, now we cap at 2000 AP, and then just move a decimal point in damage calculations, and everything would be the same. We just have 10 times the amount of AP as before. So straight buffing and nerfing is the final solution, but Pearl Abyss has shown themselves very reluctant to do this, which is why I don't really put too much stock into that as the third solution. So my personal favorite solution is definitely stat dilution, but I really would like kind of a hybrid between stat dilution and stat stick greens, where they bring greens up to the level of boss gear in terms of stats, but boss gear then offers horizontal progression, which allows for much greater customization of your stats and then lets players using boss gear really excel at their chosen roles. A Dark Knight doesn't necessarily care for extra DP and damage reduction and evasion compared to AP, accuracy, and extra damage against humans, as well as attack speed, because the Dark Knight is really just a nuker. You get in there, use your iframes to avoid the damage, you throw out a bunch of massive AoE spells, and you get the hell out. On the other hand, a Valkyrie would love to switch to a more DP and DR-oriented set with a bit of extra evasion, as well as some extra resist for crowd control, so that she can tank much more efficiently and stay in the fight much longer. By making stat stick greens, they don't need to worry about players not being able to play in Node Wars and getting instantly blown up or not able to do any damage, but these players would still underperform compared to the players that have put in the time and effort to get boss gear and progressed horizontally into an optimal set of stats for their chosen role. And then if you implement that with stat dilution, you've got a perfect sort of beginner to mid-game set in greens that they can raise up to Tett or Pen or buy off the marketplace, and then slowly transition into their preferred boss gear, even if the boss gear is at lower levels. Because the problem with stat stick greens is if you're not using full Pen green, because we wouldn't be changing the AP or DP numbers in any way, then you're going to be losing a lot of renown if you try to switch to any boss gear before it's at least Tett, which costs a lot of money. A single piece of Tett boss gear costs over 1 billion silver, just market value. Its actual value, depending on the piece of gear and the class, can reach into the 3 or 4 billion range, depending on the class. So it can get pretty insane in terms of total value. And asking a new player to wait for 3 or 4 billion silver to replace even one piece of gear is a lot to do. So adding that in stat dilution would mean that they'd have a powerful but not optimal set of early to mid-game gear, and then they could then use that gear to progress much faster towards boss gear and transition to their optimal sort of stats for the role. Now, if I'm being honest, the real problem in the game lies with accessories, because accessories offer truly ridiculous amounts of extra AP or DP per enhancement level compared to the base accessory level. An Ogre Ring at base offers 10 AP. An Ogre Ring at Pen offers 30 AP, triple what the original Ogre Ring offers. And accessories have such an easy solution. Just give us a plus 15 system with a new type of enhancement material that doesn't make accessories blow up, and we're good. Like, that's all you've got to do. Then, for players that want to go further, they can risk the current accessory system and blowing them up, but they can always just fall back on plus 15s. Honestly, accessories are the real problem in the game because you've got 6 accessories, and the difference between duo or tri-blue accessories and tri-yellow accessories is actually pretty significant when you multiply that difference 6 times. It's something like 30 or 40 AP if you really get the good stuff compared to meh or okay accessories, and there's simply not enough welfare sets that are decent. The Asula set's great, but the Asula set's trash compared to actual late game accessories, and that's honestly a pretty big problem. But gear disparity is definitely something I would like to see addressed in Black Desert. I can understand why Pearl Abyss is reluctant to change it. They did kind of shoot themselves in the foot a few times now by making pen so difficult and then never changing the system to make it easier or to give players sort of a guaranteed way to do it. They are finally implementing the Caphras system, but even that's going to cost billions and billions of silver to get pen, and it's really kind of showing that they are never going to go above pen unless they absolutely need to. But by doing so, they made it much harder for them to introduce new content that is both challenging to existing players and possible to do for sort of mid-game to even late-game players that just don't have the super-powered Tett or really pen gear. Kama Sylve is something that a lot of players cannot experience a good part of it simply because of how difficult many of the monsters there are. It's a very wonderful region. It's beautiful. It's got a pretty decent story to it compared to the rest of Black Desert, which is not a high bar to set, but still. And there's quite a few good rewards there, but most of the player base cannot participate because they don't have the gear. And this is definitely something the developers should be trying to mitigate and fix, especially because the end game for Black Desert is PvP, and the fact that players can go Dynasty Warriors on poor, lesser geared players is somewhat of a problem. But there are a lot of players that also think that is a great thing, and that they should be rewarded for their successful RNG and successful attempts at increasing their gear above certain levels. So, gear disparity, it is a problem. I've given my solutions, but obviously I'm not trying to claim that my solutions are perfect or anything. I'm sure there are even better solutions out there. Please do comment below on what you think of both my solutions and the current state of gear disparity in the game. Do you think that the amount of bonus stats and level of power that players obtain for going for Tett and pen is worthwhile, and that they should be given that level of power for pretty much having the balls to go through with those enhancement attempts? Or do you think that the power level is a little too high, especially with the renown system, and that lower geared players and lesser geared players should be given more power in an attempt to balance the game out? Do you think my solutions are good, or are there things you'd fix, things you'd change, or entirely new solutions that I haven't thought about that would work far better in your opinion? So comment below. As always, subscribe if you liked it, and have a good one, guys.